Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar with the title Striking the Right Balance, State and Non-State Engagement within Technical and Vocational Education and Training. This discussion is co-hosted by UNESCO-UNEVOC, the International Center for Technical and Vocational Education and Training, and the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report. Today's event is a culmination in a thought partnership between the GEM report and UNEVOC teams on the 2021-22 Global Education Monitoring Report with the title Non-State Actors in Education, Who Chooses, Who Loses, which was launched last December. My name is Jan Swielek. I'm working with UNESCO-UNEVOC as team leader in the field of private sector engagement. The aim for the next 1.5 hours is to give the floor to representatives of different types of TVET actors and discuss together today's topic about state and non-state actors in TVET. But before we start, there are a couple of housekeeping items to be mentioned. So I would like to ask you to keep your microphones and cameras off during the webinar. But of course, we want to encourage you, our audience, to interact in our webinar and invite you to pose your questions throughout the event using the chat function. Please don't forget to include the name of the speaker you're addressing your question to, and these questions will be used to guide the Q&A session we are having later on. I would also like to inform you that this session will be recorded. So, non-state actors are involved in all aspects of education, but for some levels of education, their presence is more dominant and in some cases even integral. Technical and vocational education and training, TVET, is commonly associated with private and economic stakeholders. Both formal and informal TVET are codependent on various private and non-state actors' involvement for quality, effectiveness, relevance of training, and even more. Where learning on the job is an inherent feature of training provision, employers' contribution to its design and financial sustainability are becoming increasingly important and desired. As part of its mandate to compile, synthesize, and analyze the latest and most important themes in international education, the 2021-22 GEM report on non-state actors in education reviews a wide range of stakeholders and their activities across all levels of education, with an entire chapter dedicated to non-state engagement within TVET. The report calls Who Chooses, Who Loses, invites policymakers to evaluate the potentials and limitations of non-state engagement in the provision, regulations, governance, and financing across all education levels from an equity and a quality perspective. The report examines non-state involvement in the design, delivery, and funding for TVET. It provides insights on challenges as well as reflections on improving public and private sector cooperation for TVET. But why is this topic of interest to us, the international TVET community? There are many aspects, and I would just like to highlight a few of them. Some of the key challenges to education and training systems are that they are not very responsive, agile, or flexible. So the private sector must develop new competences and train employees on a continuous basis. Companies as non-private actors are at the forefront by identifying current needs for their businesses. These new skills requirements are at the same time a threat as well as an opportunity for job seekers and current employees alike. We are aware of the potential of synergies and partnerships between the private and public sectors. Along with other relevant actors, we can work together to enhance this important agenda and work towards achieving our mission, the Sustainable Development Goals. In the best case, it's a triple win situation, profiting the individual, companies, as well as society. And it's our responsibility to ensure that nobody is left behind during these challenging times of significant change. Over the next 90 minutes, we will hear from state and non-state actors reflect on the report's findings and recommendations and share their own experiences from across the sector. But let's first hear some welcoming remarks from the head of UNESCO-UNEVOC, Mr. Friedrich Hübler. Welcome, Friedrich. I hope you're doing fine. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jan. And hello and welcome to today's webinar. As Jan already mentioned, this is hosted by the Global Education Monitoring Report and UNESCO-UNEVOC. Over the next 90 minutes, we will have the opportunity to examine some of the key findings from the 2021-22 GEM report, particularly as it relates to non-state engagement in technical and vocational education and training, or TVET. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the Global Education Monitoring Report, and for 2 decades these reports have now informed national, regional and global debates on a diverse array of issues. UNESCO-UNEVOC congratulates the GEM report on reaching this impressive milestone, and we are pleased to have been able to contribute to the current edition. At UNESCO-UNEVOC, we recognize the importance of fostering collaboration with non-state actors to ensure that TVET is demand-driven and future-focused. In fact, one of our program areas is dedicated to private sector engagement, which aims to provide opportunities for all parties to prepare for the future of work and TVET collectively, and to synergize private sector investment in TVET. Our work on private sector engagement is carried out through our global UNEVOC network of more than 220 member institutions in nearly 150 countries. A matching process for TVET-related training facilitates exchange between interested private enterprises and UNEVOC centers, and we have maximized the impact by prioritizing sectors disrupted by automation, digitalization, and the transition to a green and sustainable economy. These training opportunities are also closely linked to UNESCO's Global Skills Academy, whose mission is to support 10 million youth in developing key digital and 21st century skills, thereby increasing their employability and enabling them to thrive in digitized economies and labor markets. Cooperation with non-state actors has become crucial in understanding volatile labor markets and anticipating skills demands. The 2021-22 GEM report highlights that non-state actors are involved in all aspects of education, and nowhere is this more evident than in the TVET sector. Apart from entry-level skills, non-state actors dominate technical and vocational education and training. Both formal and informal TVET have become increasingly reliant on the involvement of private and non-state actors for quality, effectiveness, and relevance of training. But how can we strike the right balance to encourage equity and inclusion and ensure that no one is left behind? During today's discussion, we look forward to listening to our panelists' perspectives and learning from their experiences on how the right mix of state and non-state engagement can support optimal skills development. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Friedrich. I'm also looking very much forward to our discussion. But before we start, I'm now delighted to introduce GEM Report colleague and research officer, Ms. Francesca Endrizzi. As part of the research team, Francesca is a specialist and contributes on thematic and monitoring analysis in the field of adult and vocational education. Today, she will share with us selected findings and recommendations from the latest GEM report to set the scene for today's discussion. As Friedrich just mentioned, the report is celebrating its 20th anniversary. The latest GEM report is just one of many critical contributions the report has made, marked by its editorial independence and its role as a global public good. But let's first watch a short video to introduce the report and set the floor for Francesca. Please.
The Global Education Monitoring Report was born 20 years ago. In 2015, it received an official mandate to monitor countries' progress towards the education goal in the 2030 Agenda, SDG 4. Published by UNESCO, the report has two defining features. First, it mobilizes its own resources. Second, the report is editorially independent. This means it is not beholden to the interests of any country, organization, agenda, or group. It holds all actors to account for their commitments to SDG 4. It aims to be the main resource for decision makers on inclusive and equitable quality education. It has produced one global report almost every year since 2002. It believes that, by producing rigorous evidence, data, and recommendations, it will improve policy dialogue and peer learning, and will strengthen education systems to help achieve SDG 4. But the GEM report is so much more than just one annual publication. It produces regional reports, gender reports, reports written with and for youth, and policy papers on specific issues. These are published in multiple languages. From conception to publication, one report takes 18 months. Hundreds of thousands engage with the findings when they are published, via events, videos, animations, blogs, and the media. Multiple partners are involved. For instance, for its regional report series, including a new spotlight report on foundational literacy and numeracy in Africa, for research on education finance, to monitor the G7 global objectives on girls' education, and on the results report of the Global Partnership for Education. 4 websites inform education action around the world. PEER compiles national profiles of education laws and policies to help countries learn from each other. SCOPE provides interactive narratives of the main issues in SDG 4. VIEW compiles multiple data sources to estimate out-of-school and completion rate trends. WIDE visualizes education inequality between and within countries. These last two activities are part of a strong partnership with the UNESCO Institute for Statistics that extends to helping countries set national SDG 4 benchmarks. These multiple outputs are extensively used for policy, but also for advocacy. The 2011 report turned the world's attention to education in conflict. It led to a new UN resolution recognizing attacks on schools as human rights violations. The 2013-14 report made the strongest case for a standalone education goal and emphasized the need to put learning at the heart of the SDGs. The 2020 GEM report fed into legal debates in Brazil and Spain to prevent children with disabilities from being segregated into different classrooms. GEM report estimates of the finance gap for education have driven donor contributions. These estimates have fed into multiple education financing campaigns around the world. There is much to celebrate from the past 20 years. Support the report and help strengthen its voice for change.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm Francesca Andrizzi. Thank you, Jan, for your presentation. Thank you, Friedrich, also for yours and for being here. Let me also start to say on behalf of the Global Education Monitoring Report that we are really glad to collaborate with UNEVOC, and it's been really available cooperation throughout the years, also for this year for the content development of this report, and specifically for the TVET chapter. I'm going to share my screen, so I will start presenting a few findings and recommendations from the report. I hope everything is fine and you can see my presentation. So let me start by basically reminding everyone how important this topic is as the framework for action that is our roadmap for achieving SDG 4 highlighted the crucial role of non-state actors in education. But as Jan mentioned, non-state actors in education are highly diverse. And so it has been also challenging for us to approach this topic. The report tried to look at multiple stakeholders, so not only private actors or businesses, and also investigated all aspects of education in which non-state actors are actually involved. So from provision to finance regulations and innovation. And to do so, it was important to structure the report by levels of education, but as you can imagine, they differ greatly. So the association of non-state actors in TVET is much different from primary education, for example. And because the presence of non-state actors is more evident in TVET, it's even necessary. And as my colleague mentioned, TVET is commonly associated with private and economic stakeholders. Let me start from providing like a general overview of provision, and so from some key statistics. According to UNESCO Institute for Statistics estimates, the share of enrollments in private institutions in post-secondary, non-tertiary at least, was about 40%. And of course, with variations across regions, so from 12% in East Asia to 76% in Oceania. This trend is actually consistent also among more high-income countries, on which we have actually more data. So in OECD countries, we see similar estimates, but we can also add that this share tends to increase at higher education levels. However, I would like to stress and also to draw your attention on one point, that the actual size of non-state involvement is really hard to access. As you can imagine, skills are routinely acquired outside formal and non-formal contexts, as individuals follow informal paths to lifelong learning opportunities. And that's why this data are only partial data, so provide only a partial picture, as these are the informal aspects are really hard or not impossible to, unfortunately, to capture. From our analysis, however, we can see that cooperation with non-state actors has aimed to make TVET systems more responsive to labor market demands. And their presence is actually manifested across all systems and contexts. So from more consolidated public TVET systems to other contexts where actually they initiated or they complemented TVET provision. So, and this has been done through traditional procurement, but also more autonomous training initiatives. And more recently, the expansion has also been supported by public-private partnerships, PPPs, mostly coordinated by the state. As you may know, each actor in a PPP contributes according to its resources, expertise, and interest. And unlike in traditional forms of cooperation, these PPPs that we can define more provision-oriented tend to be more comprehensive, so to address also career services, orientation, and guidance. And where implemented, they actually led to an increase in participation and in employability. Less surprisingly, private businesses have always led and are still leading on continuing training, so to provide skilling and upskilling or reskilling for youth and adults. According to our studies, to our research, we see that the adjustments of skills development to the current needs is mainly occurring outside traditional education, so with non-formal and employer-sponsored training prevailing. And this is true not only in actually in contexts where we have more data, and it's mostly in Europe, but also at the international and the global level. I would like to cite, for example, the World Bank skills measurement program that showed that employers tended to prefer on-the-job training over external programs provided either by public or private providers. However, we see that equity is not always ensured. Unfortunately, it's not always guaranteed, as we know that employers in bigger firms are more likely to have access to training opportunities. So we see that non-state actors may encourage or obstruct equity and inclusion in TVET. Enterprises, for example, may contribute to perpetuating discrimination in making the final selection in case of apprenticeship. But we have not to say that not all non-state actors actually are obstructing equity. Faith-based institutions, depending on the context, and civil society organizations, actually they cater for more disadvantaged populations. And maybe contrary to what we generally think, in poorer countries, also public systems do not always ensure an equitable provision and equitable access, because tight entry requirements and inadequate provision mean that the few places are available and are mostly taken by urban and relatively well-off youth. With this, the dominance of non-state actors in provision, we see that it's quite challenging. So to the task of governing and regulating skills development systems. And according to our analysis, we saw that these systems, despite its presence, the non-state actors' engagement, remain highly centralized. And non-state stakeholders actually they have limited opportunities to shape TVET systems. Interactions occur for sure, mostly in implementation, as we see some more in provision or in skills identification. And I would like to mention, for example, more recently the emergence of new type of PPPs that we can categorize as more knowledge-oriented, so-called sector skills councils, that they gather all actors in a given sector, in a given industry, and they foster with the aim to foster dialogue and anticipate skills needs. Of course, that in this context, quality is also at stake. While in TVET, not only in general in education, non-state actors are generally associated with quality of provision, with innovation. We believe that states or governments in general have to make sure that the provision is actually of quality and quality for all. Countries have really made considerable progress in developing, defining quality assurance mechanisms, even if with different emphasis. However, it's quite consistent is that they are hardly implemented or rarely implemented, and non-state actors do not have really the incentives to align with those requirements. Finally, on financing, we see generally that TVET is often neglected and is an underfunded systems, and despite the growing presence of non-state actors and the hopes of leveraging their resources, from our data, we see that enterprises, at least in Europe, where we have more data, tend to underinvest in training and compare, for example, with other assets. And countries worldwide have put in place different mechanisms to provide incentives to employers to organize their training or to arrange external training, for example, in the form of living grant programs. In parallel, countries have also worked to provide incentives to individuals and in order to overcome one of the major burden and constraints that is still affordability. And they've done so with individual learning programs, for example, or individual entitlements. And as there is no one-fits-all solution, some have proved also successful in increasing training, but of course they are also highly context dependent. Let me conclude with a few recommendations drawing on the report, and that I try to make it more tailored to TVET. One is about establishing quality standards that apply to all state and non-state education institutions. So standards that should cover not just inputs, but also processes and results. Quality assurance mechanisms should also monitor and enforce these standards, and regulations that are often impractical, as I mentioned, and I could observe from these findings, and do not always protect the disadvantage. The report calls on governments to have a clear vision also on how to engage non-state actors and see them as partners. So it's very important for governments to help innovation spread the education system. So working in partnership with all actors, but to build also a system that works for all and that can ensure equitable opportunities, education and training opportunities for all. And finally, we need to maintain also transparency and integrity of policy processes. So to give all voices equal chance to be expressed, also to participate, so to influence policy, and on the other hand, to monitor and safeguard against lobbying and revolving door practices. Thank you all for your attention, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the panelists and to learning also from the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Francesca, for these interesting findings. I can imagine it's quite a challenge to boil all this down from all the research you have done and so many pages in the report focusing on this topic. But these are very interesting findings, and also especially at the end, thank you for the important recommendations from the latest GEM report. Yeah, we are looking also now forward to our panelists, to our actual discussions. We have 4 speakers for our panel today. After their individual input, we will later go into our discussion round. And now, first of all, I'm delighted to introduce to you our first speaker, Mrs. Nazreen Mani. Yes, Nazreen, there you are. Great to have you here. Thank you. Nazreen is the Executive Director of the Global Apprenticeship Network and a specialist in the field of social policy, focusing on sustainable skills development and youth employment. Nazreen is also a strong advocate for inclusion and access in training and work. She works closely with private sector companies and also international development entities to drive forward the agenda for agile workforce development within the context of the future of work. So quite a broad range. We are delighted to have you here, Nazreen. Please, the floor is yours for your input.
Thank you, Jan. And it's an absolute pleasure to participate this morning and represent the view of a non-state actor. As you rightly mentioned, the Global Apprenticeship Network is an alliance of mainly private sector members, as well as development agencies and governments, but we very much focus on the role of the private sector in shaping vocational education, in shaping work-based learning. And I've put this slide up here just to speak to what the private sector is dealing with largely at the moment in terms of ensuring that there is a correct and appropriate supply of skills into the labor market. And we know that our education systems, basic education and vocational education, along with higher education, are also under pressure to make sure that they are appropriately aligned to the demands of this rapidly changing world of work. We know we're dealing with unstable labor market recovery. Just when we thought that economies were starting to return to normal, globally we're being hit with issues of recession and other issues, economic issues. This very variable shifts in economies is also affecting subsectors and sectors of the economy. So some are urgently requiring skills. If we look at airlines in Europe at the moment, chaos on a daily basis because people were let go during the pandemic, but organizations didn't train sufficiently in between. The inequality issue, and Francesca raised it during her input, is important and is one that we cannot lose sight of. Across the development issues, we know the setbacks that COVID has caused, particularly for youth and for women. Then this rapid technological advancements that are offering both opportunities as well as challenges. And I think the report went into some detail about the difficulties that education systems are having in adapting to technology shifts and ensuring that people have the right access and equitable access to information technology and the need for digital skills, which are rapidly rising globally. The nature of work is rapidly changing, and we also need to make sure that our education systems are built to respond to these changing ways of working and ensuring that people are also skilled to be able to take up opportunities such as gig work, platform work, remote work, and the like. And then the issue of mental health is something that is very, very significant, and we cannot ignore both in education systems, for our educators, for our learners, as well as in the world of work. As I said, GAN is a multi-sector alliance. It was set up coming out of the G20 processes as a private
Sorry,
sector
Nasreen, to interrupt you for a second.
To ensuring that young people have access. Yes, Jan. Yes, Jan.
Sorry, it's very delayed, and the connection seems not to be very
Jan,
good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you might switch off your video,
okay.
that might help. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
That might
Maybe
help.
that's better.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for, no, not a problem. Thank you for alerting me, Jan, no problem. I was saying that the focus of the GAN is really to shape access to learning, but to shape a private sector response. How can these non-state actors really involve themselves in systemic change, in driving thought leadership, in creating content? So we do that through working on standards and projects. And then we work at a country level, because it's also very important to note that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. It really has to be designed to country context, to local need and demand. It's important to also ensure that the systemic influence is where we can shape this enabling environment for quality delivery. Francesca made the point about quality standards, and I think that is key. We've just come out of working with the ILO this year that puts quality at the heart of the system, that ensures that there's equitable access, that all actors in the space, from employers to trade unions to governments and the international policy space, are able to collaborate in designing a system that will ensure that learners leave with recognized credentials at the end of that process. The network approach, as I mentioned, is key. These are examples of GAN country networks. It does mean working and understanding local policy strategies, local policy need. But an important aspect of this work is advocacy. Driving the recognition and the validity of vocational education as a respectable pathway to work. I think one of the biggest challenges we face across the world is the very poor recognition of vocational education, the stigma towards it, when it is a meaningful and viable pathway. Return on investment, the ability far outweighs even some university qualifications. As the GAN, we work closely by sharing this global perspective, by facilitating the best practice. I think key to this
So did we lose Nasreen in the meanwhile? Oh no. Seems like the connection wasn't really good. Just please give her a moment if she might come back. There she is again. Nasreen, can you hear us?
Yeah, and my apologies. It's not cooperating. I'm here. I was about to say that my internet connection is not cooperating with me this morning. So let me finish, and I'm going to switch to a more stable connection. So I think in summary, what I wanted to emphasize is the need for partnership, the need for collaboration, and really the need for the private sector to engage meaningfully, both on curriculum design, on labor market demand, and on ensuring that opportunities are created for whether it's young or older learners to be able to access the workforce using these qualifications. The issue of inclusion, of equity and access are key, and they are essential elements of the GAN strategy as well as of the partners that we work with. So thank you very much, and my apologies for the poor connection.
Thank you very much, Nasreen. You brought it to a good end, and I would say three quarters were very good to follow, and in between we lost you, but that's fine. So I hope we got most of the points that you wanted to stress. Thanks a lot for your input. Before we go into discussion,
a good display of the need
for good technology and stable internet connections.
Sorry, I was saying it's a good display of the need for. That's right.
Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah.
Delay in the... But before we go into discussion, I would like to hear our other speakers first. The next one I'm happy to announce is Mr. Dr. Matthew Fury. Matthew, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Perfect.
Good morning,
thanks.
everyone. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Matthews, he is head of strategy and business development and responsible for strategy development and management in the Human Resource Development Council in Botswana, which is also one of our UNEVOC centers. In his professional career, Matthews has gained experience in many different fields, such as community development, education statistics and research, TVET promotion and coordination, and even much more. Thank you, Matthews, for being here with us today. We are looking forward to your input. Please.
All right, thank you, Jen. As I've greeted everyone else before, I think all are good in terms of the health-wise, especially since we've been threatened by different health problems these days. Nowadays, we are talking monkeypox. Yes, my presentation on the private sector engagement for quality TVET in Botswana. And I'll be just indicating some of the lessons and experiences that we have. Next slide, please. Botswana is basically a small country in terms of population with about 2.35 million or 2.34, especially looking at the census that was undertaken last year in 2021. But it's basically a big country in terms of the land or the sparsity of the land, more like the size of France. The GDP, based on that GDP is I think the GDP per capita based on the GDP of 16.5 million is 6,849. And we have a higher enrollment rate at primary school of 103.2%. Statisticians will understand why you can have a percentage more than 100. It's basically that the enrollment rate is for a certain group of people, certain age group. But now, because of other factors, there are other students or learners who are outside that age group bracket. And our enrollment rate in tertiary for ages 18 and 24 is 19.5%. Next slide, please. So basically, after that little knowledge of Botswana, there's more we can talk about Botswana. I'm looking now specifically at non-state actors in the country, especially in terms of TVET and human resource development. And we basically have main key players in the non-state actors being private companies, private education and training providers at university, college, and other levels, non-government organizations. We have a couple of those also, international development partners, and also key is their households. Next slide, please. So in terms of private companies and their contribution to the development of TVET, we usually have reference committees and technical committees that we do in Botswana when we develop policies, and most of this we develop with the inclusion of all other sectors, including the private companies, either through themselves individually or through their associations. We have an association of private companies here called Business Botswana, which in most cases is the one that is always involved in development of policies and other strategies and plans within the country. Private companies also engage in workplace training. And this is also assisted by ourselves, being the HRDC, who actually manage the Human Resource Development Fund. This is a kind of a training levy fund where we fund all companies or private companies that train their staff, or we reimburse them the cost of training their employees. So we also, these companies also add to the training levy through contributions. They pay a levy based on their turnover, and what basically the funding from the Human Resource Development Fund comes from. So it's a wholly private company sponsored fund with no other funds from anywhere, including from government. We also have our private companies in our skills councils, or what we call skills councils that side. In Botswana, we call them sector committees, sector human resource development committees, which are also under the Human Resource Development Council. And the private sector also, the private companies also help in determining the skills needs within their establishment and within the nation and even globally, using their expertise. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you very much. Now, looking at the sponsorship, it's okay. Go back again to that pie chart. Oh, thank you very much. The sponsorship is skewed towards government, mainly as Botswana's economic activities are mainly driven by government needs or government procurement. And you find that we have a little industrial or private companies based here in Botswana. The ones which are here, most of them are dependent on government procurement. And therefore, government is basically the main sponsor. And you can also notice that the other non-state actors, especially households being served there, constitute 22%, which is more than the sponsorship that companies do provide to employers. So households actually play a very bigger role in sponsoring the learners into institutions. Next slide, please. Now, these private companies, as we engage with them through sector committees and other forms or forums, have also indicated that apart from the core technical or vocational skills that they get, they also really want a learner who is really comprehensive in terms of both hard skills and soft skills. The learner should probably have, or coming out of the institution, having these other attributes such as positive attitude, flexibility, loyalty, and also communication and ITC skills, knowledge, self-motivation, integrity, and also they should be able to solve problems and be good teamwork. So it's very important that while you might have those technical qualifications, you also have these attributes that will make you survive in the labor market. Next slide, please. Right, the next non-state actors is the private education and training providers. This is our universities, our colleges, and all that. So these play a very, 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 very important role, especially since government of Botswana took a decision a few years back or some years back to actually now start sponsoring students in private institutions. Initially, government only sponsored students in government-owned institutions. But after now establishing a quality assurance system in Botswana, government now started to sponsor students in those institutions which have been quality assured or accredited by the Botswana Qualifications Authority. Now, if you look at that pie chart, the one in the middle there, you'll find that we have at least 35% of private institutions taking up the enrollment, or the enrollment being taken up by private institutions is 35%, while the government institutions take around 65% in terms of enrollment. So the other pie charts are basically just to give further information as to the distribution of the enrollments and the institutions. Next slide, please. The education providers also participate in skills demand focus. They are also form part of our sector skills committees. They also play a bigger role there in actually helping us to come up with sector plans or sector human resource development plans that will basically be able to address the needs of the the employers. So it is important to have them inside those committees so that they can have a conversation with the employers. And we also include them in terms of development accreditation of programs in TVET through the Botswana Qualification Authority and also the Human Resource Development Council. Then we also include them basically as the private sector in the policy development of all programs in Botswana, all policies and strategies in Botswana, through being part of the reference and technical committees engaged in that. Next slide, please. Yes, the other non-state actor we have here in Botswana is non-government organization, and a number of these institutions which are actually run by non-government organizations are basically TVET institutions providing qualifications at certificate level. And some of these are actually heavily assisted by government in terms of probably them being government sponsored, but at governance level, they are run by communities. And we also have NGOs also who participate in our skills focused or skills councils. And we also have them in our policy development structures where we do reference and technical committees, and also in some consultancies, the non-government organizations are engaged in that.
Great, Matthews.
Next slide, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a minute left. Thanks.
I think we have two. This is the one but last.
Perfect.
We also have international development partners like UNESCO-UNEVOC here as we speak. We also have others like GIZ. We also have, the European Union. We have the others like embassies in Botswana who also help in the development of TVET. Some of these projects they're involved in the development of Botswana policy, the BEAR project, the development of multi-pathways in Botswana, and also a project of training women in the rural areas, from rural areas being the BEAR4 project. And they are now recently launched an operating BEAR project. Next slide, please. Yeah, the last but one is the households. The households, as indicated there, they constitute 22% of student funding. So they are very important, and they also provide psychological and motivational support to learners, because learners come from their parents and their uncles and their extended families. And households are very important also because they provide hospitality, especially in terms of accommodation, transport, food, clothing. Thank you. The last slide now, we talk about the key lessons that we learned from there and what we need to be looking into in terms of TVET strategy. These are issues of relevance, access, quality, qualifications, and pathways, and advocacy. The most important part is the one of digitization, as we learned from COVID-19 that the traditional way of delivering education and training has to really be reviewed so that we can access students whenever they are and wherever they are. Thank you, Jen. That's the end.
That's the end. Thanks, Matthew. Thank you very much for these first-hand insights from Botswana. Our next speaker is Dr. Ahmed Sami. Ahmed, you are with us. I could just see you. You're around. Ahmed is the... Perfect. Great. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining. Ahmed is the Executive Director of Strategy and Future at the Higher Colleges of Technology from the United Arab Emirates, and he is head of their lead center of the UNEVOC's Co-Action initiative. So we are very much looking forward to your presentation. And please, Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. And I'd like to start by extending my appreciation to the host, the Global Education Monitoring Report, as well as the UNEVOC for hosting this important webinar on such an important topic. I hope you can see my screen now. Let me go ahead straight to giving my input. I'll make this as brief as possible, just to give you an overview of our own perspective, my institutional perspective, the Higher College of Technology. And then maybe during the Q&A, we can come back to these slides if there is relevance. So just a quick snapshot of who is the Higher College of Technology. So we are the largest applied higher education institution in the United Arab Emirates. We've got 16 campuses, so we have the reach across the UAE. We've been there for 34 years, since '88, and we've got more than 64,000 graduates. In a small country like the UAE, that's a large number of graduates. And you can also see more than about 90,000 credentials have been awarded. A good number of awards. The one that I would highlight is that we are institutionally accredited by the Quality Assurance Agency in the UK. More than 21,000 students were enrolled last year. And as you can see that the majority are female students. We've got 71 applied program. So we'd like to identify our programs as in applied. So obviously the focus on skills and competencies is pretty much embedded in our programs across 6 different specializations. So that's who we are. But also it would have been, it's got to give you the complete picture of our identity. We need to talk more a little bit about what is our strategy. And perhaps from there, we can straight go to the industry engagement with our strategy and with the projects that we undertake. So we would like to define ourselves in terms of the purpose. We exist to become or being the talent and skill incubator. So we've got to focus on developing skills and incubating them as well as talents. We also like to think of ourselves as the arm for the country, for the government to deliver their vision with regards to providing learning pathways that fulfill industry needs. So you will see that industry is in our purpose, but again, the state is also a very important actor. So, and that goes very well to the topic of this webinar. Our aspirations, a couple of them that I would like to note that require, ongoing systematic industry engagement, education towards wealth creating careers, and launching startups with economic impact. We cannot deliver on those two if the industry is not only engaging, but partnering with us throughout the ecosystem. And I would also like to highlight that when we look at our aspirations, we look also at the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not just quality education where we believe we've got an input and we have a point of alignment, but there are other SDGs as well, such as industry innovation, partnerships with our goals, as well as the decent work and economic growth and climate actions. These are all important goals where we believe that our institution should be aligned to. So straight to the point, government, HCT, and industry, the 3 of them working together. This slide is really about where are the touch points with the industry primarily. So it will not address the government piece, but it would address the HCT industry relation. And by industry here, we are referring to all the non-state actors out there. So on the left-hand side, you will see that we talk about things that are primarily funding that is coming from the industry in the form of scholarships, in the form of sponsorships towards employment for our students, or even in the form of contributions in kind or direct or financial for facilities and knowledge contributions. So that's one element of how we look at the industry engagement and touch point. But there's another element which is extremely important to our business as well, and that has to do with the curriculum, the modules, the training material that we use, the programs that we deliver. And it's not just a matter of a one-time review, but we call this more of a co-creation. So it has to be co-created with the industry from the very first initiation of those programs and throughout its review cycles. We also have the typical workplace integrated learning, and that is primarily focused on internships and work placements that our students need to have. For our vocational programs, we're talking about almost, around 50% on-the-job training, and that has to do at the workplace. You also have a couple of other areas where industry engagement is extremely important. Demand-driven research. We're in the business of applied research. We deliver solutions to the industry, innovative solutions, we hope, and that has to be led by the industry in terms of the demand that is coming from them. Entrepreneurship, graduating startups and companies is also in our strategy, and that cannot happen without industry engagement. So as you can see, there's a number of touch points here where we talk about industry engagement. I'd like to close by just picking a couple of what we believe were success stories that materialized throughout the past 5 years. The first one is what we call the integration of professional certifications and qualifications. So that's where we look into, the typical professional qualifications out there, like the PMP or the CIPD or the CMA, and we look into their bodies of knowledge and we embed those in our programs and curricula. Now, we all know that these professional certifications were either co-developed with the industry or endorsed by the industry. So it has that continuous update to reflect what the industry wants in terms of skills and competencies. And we take those and we embed them in our programs. That had tremendous impact on our graduates employed in the private sector. For example, you see it moving from 26% in 2017 all the way to 67% in 2021, and it's actually even going further. We had 83% of our graduates in 2021 awarded professional certifications qualifications, and that was very much tied to the increase in the employability in the private sector, but also in the employer satisfaction with our programs and their industry relevance. You can see that it's now at 97%, and that's very key for us to be able to move forward. The second and the last success story that I'd like to highlight, it has to do with this element of graduating companies. And you can see here that we've got a process. There's a framework from innovation to incubation to venture, and that's what we call incubation. And throughout that process, it's a 10-step process. 8 out of those 10-step process require industry engagement. It wouldn't work without industry engagement. And we were able, with that sort of industry engagement and partnership throughout the process, to deliver some really good results. More than 132 startups launched, for example, since 2019. So with that, I'd like to stop here. And again, I can always refer back to any of these slides if the questions come from the audience that are relevant to those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, especially for your the focus on the industry engagement that is here really of utmost importance for us and the focus of this webinar. So thank you very much. We're coming then back probably to some of these points deeper. I'm also specifically interested in the co-creation of curricula, for example. So I hope you have still done some time to go deeper into this. But before we go into our discussion round, I would like to introduce to you our fourth speaker for today, Mr. Zhang Jing.
Hello.
Yes, Jing, I can hear you. Perfect. We are very happy to have you here today as a representative of the private sector. Jing is Senior Director of Huawei Education Talent Ecosystem, and he's responsible for managing the Huawei Global ICT Talent Ecosystem, as well as the ICT Academy development, is in strategic planning and project implementation at the Huawei ICT Academy as well. So we are looking very much forward to your input, Jing. You have the floor, please.
Thank you. I will show my screen.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zhang Jing. I'm Senior Director of Huawei Education Talent Ecosystem. I'm based in Shenzhen, China. Nice to meet you. Hope today, after my presentation, you will be aware of Huawei talent ecosystem, and hope we can explore more collaboration with the universities and the colleges. Firstly, some short word about Huawei. Huawei, as a leading global provider of ICT infrastructure and smart devices, Huawei is committed to extending our ICT capabilities to various industries for supporting their digital transformation. According to Huawei's annual report 2021, Huawei was the second largest global R&D investor. Over half of our employees are engaged in R&D, and our vision and mission is bring digital to every person, home, organizations for a fully connected, intelligent world. So our fully business group is mainly from three. First is consumer business, second is carrier business, third one is enterprise business. For the consumer business, Huawei now is launching the cutting-edge mobile operation system. We call it Ahmed OS. Now already over 220 million Huawei devices for consumers has been equipped. And the carrier business is, I think all of you know, Huawei's 5G network provided the best user experience. And the enterprise business, now we are cooperating with 267 of Fortune 500 companies globally, over 700 cities for their digital transformation. So we see globally over 170 countries has released their digital strategy. Digital transformation required a lot of ICT talent, but according to the authoritative organization focused, the gap of ICT professional worldwide next decade around 10 million. So Huawei found the solution to bridge the gap between talent, supply, and the demand. Huawei has set up a three-tree model for TVET. The first tree, we call it education talent ecosystem. It's mainly Huawei through the Huawei ICT Academy program to enhance the university enterprise collaboration and provide the fair quality education to the students. The second tree, we call it industry talent ecosystem. Huawei through Huawei extend our digital skills and capability to enhance the enterprise and the peoples who are on duty to promote their digital skills. The third tree is, we call it public, and it means for the lifelong learners. We, through our authorized learning partner, provide the examining and the training services and using Huawei certification system. And here we provide the Huawei certification system, our courses, teaching materials, platform, and the corresponding activities. So Huawei's education talent ecosystem builds talent alliance, improve talent skills, develop talent standards, and promote talent value. So here, we, through these 4 points, would like to improve the students' ICT skills. And after the students getting the ICT knowledge, we provide the Huawei talent standard and to estimate the teaching result, and then through our several activities such as job fair and the Huawei ICT competition to make sure the students can become the ICT talent for the sustainable digital society. So now globally we already have 2,000 Huawei ICT academies and 150,000 active students. And our goal is we would like to have more than 7,000 Huawei ICT academies and 1.5 million students. So this is our collaboration model. It's quite simple. This program, we call it Huawei ICT Academy. It means Huawei authorize the teaching enablement learning resources to the universities and helps them teaching the teachers and provide the whole teaching materials and the learning materials and to enhance the students' ICT skills and hands-on experience. So here is what we are providing to the universities. We providing the 4 levels learning materials. It's including the introductory courses, professional courses, and the practice and the industry courses. And meanwhile, in China, we also attend the China Ministry of Education program. We call it 1+X. And under this program, Huawei, together with the teachers, developed the materials for the Huawei ICT Academy. And the English version will be launched after the first half of this year. And also in the key countries, we announced the ASC, this new type of the partner from Huawei ecosystem. The ASC has the right to manage Huawei ICT academies in the key countries. And we provide the different type of the training to trainer services. There is a different model, Huawei plus Talent Alliance and universities, and also Huawei through our authorized learning partner, and Huawei do by ourselves. So here, Huawei set up a whole system for the digital skills quality standard. We call it Huawei ICT certification system. It includes 3 levels, ACIA, ACIP, and ACIE. ACIE is the highest level, and it's high valued for the students. If the students can get this certification, it's easy for them to get the nice job. So the globally we totally have the 23 different technical fields, and already got 17,000 ACIE. So we through our hubs to expand and deliver the training and exam for the Huawei certifications. So globally we have 121 hubs. And here is several cases. I have the global partners, the crossing countries, and also some partners in China. So we are keeping invest on the Huawei ICT competition for the active students in the universities. This year, we just last week we finished the 6th Huawei ICT competition global final. Just now finished this final. We attract 85 countries and 150,000 students attended. And Huawei keep investing on the ICT talent job fair, because we are working with various industry customers, partners. We know their demand on the ICT talent. So it's our responsibility to build this bridge for the universities students. So in the key countries, each year we arrange the job fair activities. We attract our partners, customers, and invite the Huawei ICT Academy students together to match their job and the requirement. And Huawei also provides the one-stop digital talent platform for the universities. On this platform, the teachers can use the MOOCs materials and can help the students to making the online labs and the live streaming and mock exams. Here is a case. I think during the discussion session, we will go more deeply. We successfully collaborate with the one of the top one, ranked top one in China is Shenzhen Polytechnic and college, and we together integrated our qualification to the curriculum, and we achieved the National Teaching Achievement Award. I think later we will discuss more about this part. So that's all. Thank you. I hope online there are some initials who would like to know more about Huawei ICT Academy. You can go to the website and learn more. If any questions, you can directly write email to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jing. With this final input, now we have all our participants' backgrounds covered. We are ready to go into our discussion, as there are, as far as I see, no questions from the audience yet. I have prepared my first question for Nazreen. Nazreen, you're with us?
I am, yeah.
Perfect, great. As the GAN, the Global Apprenticeship Network, is a multi-sector alliance convening and connecting businesses, governments, and international organizations to promote work-based learning. Meaning you, as a non-state actor, are collaborating with state and non-state actors alike. We have seen in some of the presentations, the focus apprenticeships, internships. Apprenticeships are a fundamental part of the learning experience that rely mainly on non-state actors' engagement. However, as we can see in many regions, this is still underutilized. And for example, according to the ILO School to Work Transition Survey and also calculated in the GEM report, less than 1 out of 5 from the participating countries did at least one apprenticeship as part of their education. And this is very little. So low participation in low income countries may be linked to informality of labor markets and training systems. But if not adequately regulated and also recognized, these incentives linked to apprenticeships can be eroded. So it doesn't really work as it should. From your perspective, what do you think? How can non-state actors be encouraged to participate more in its provision? And also, what are the main limitations?
Yeah, and that's such an important question. And where we've seen good practice around encouraging participation of the private sector in traditionally low uptake countries has been where the actors all come together and formalize the engagement. So South Africa is a good example. I'm from South Africa. I've worked intimately over the years in the system, and entities like sector education and training authorities, where the private sector has a voice, labor has a voice, community and government come together to formulate standards, to formulate curricula, to design collectively incentives in the system, have shown to be hugely beneficial because there's a vested interest for all of the actors in that space. But because it's formalized, so there's an entity called the National Skills Authority. And again, you have all of these bodies, all of the parties in a very formal tripartite system like the ILO operates, and in South Africa we include community, making sure that the players are there, that each has a seat at the table is critically important. The other aspect is around incentives. And we've seen that, even in countries where there is a long history of apprenticeships, and I'll use France as an example, during COVID, the French government created incentives for entities to bring in at least one young apprentice into organizations, and they were given rebates for salaries, for the training. It made a huge difference. So where most countries showed a drop-off in apprenticeship enrollment during 2020 to 2021, 22, across France, 600,000 apprenticeships were taken in during that period. So I think the issue of incentives speaks equally in developed and developing economies to encourage private sector entities, particularly small and medium businesses, to participate. And I think that's one of the areas where we're really missing a step, is getting smaller companies to participate in the training. Larger companies, they realize the investment that's needed to develop their workforce. So they have, sophisticated learning and development teams. They have software, platforms, strategies. The secret is, how can we get SMEs who are in the main where employment is being created, particularly in developing countries, to take on the training responsibility? And the reality is twofold. One, training is expensive, so we need to create sustainable incentives. And two, we need to develop systems that are not administratively burdensome, because we're seeing that the bureaucracy is also something that keeps companies away from engaging in the training, particularly around apprenticeship training and the more formal type of training. The need for smoothing these processes is important. Intermediaries can play a big role. I mentioned the ILO discussions that we were involved in recently, and even there, the role of intermediaries to help support many of the challenges that organizations experience, from recruitment and selection of learners to the paperwork that's required, the monitoring, the evaluation throughout the training. having an intermediary is really important. And a word of advice, if I may, while I have the floor, we've seen the model from Australia of the group training organization approach as one that is really useful in replication. And the group training organization approach pools together multiple smaller businesses. The group training organization acts as the intermediary, so they take on the employment contract for a learner, and the learner simply has to move around to different small companies to get aspects of the training that's relevant. And I think it's finding that balance between quality, between ease of delivery, and ensuring that you have all parties play their fair share in terms of the responsibility for quality training. That for me would be some areas, and I think I touched on the challenges while answering the question.
Definitely. Thanks, Nazreen. A focus is on the SMEs, that's true. And I think it's necessary to prove that it's worth to have apprentices and have good experiences, and then they are spreading the word, and it hopefully continues. So thank you very much from your insights and also these global perspectives you're having from all the different countries. So very interesting. Thanks a lot so far. My second question focuses also on provision and goes to Matthews. Matthews, you're already here, great. The Human Resource Development Council is responsible for planning and funding, education and training, as well as advising the government of Botswana on all matters related to human capital development. You already stated in your presentation, non-state actors have played different role in the expansion and in the establishment of TVET. As TVET systems around the world try to diversify fundings through diverse incentives and forms of cooperation, question to you, how has Botswana encouraged non-state actors' engagement? You have touched this already in your presentation, but also what has proven to be successful for their involvement?
All right, no, thank you, Jen. I think firstly, I'll refer back to my other statement when I indicated that we also have government established that Human Resource Development Fund, which in a way was to try and get the private sector to be fully involved in the training of employees, and is basically on employees or their employees. But there are much efforts now where even companies now do take fresh students from higher education or high schools, and then they sponsor them into artisan fields. They sponsor them into relevant fields. The mining sector in Botswana is basically one of the key drivers of training learners for their specific needs. This is basically because some of these private companies have skills that the normal traditional institutions do not provide qualification for. So they will have their own in-house training for these, and we also assist them in terms of the reimbursing their costs for training students in that regard. In some other, for example, we partnered with the Botswana Chamber of Mines. Botswana Chamber of Mines is an association of mining companies in Botswana to train artisans in engineering fields and also other qualifications that they need in the mining sector. We also see the retail companies in Botswana also training their staff, and mainly because unfortunately most of the training that are undertaken are sometimes in soft skills, like customer service and communication, marketing, and all that. Not necessarily on TVET per se, but they are providing these skills to these TVET qualified people because they we see that probably they lack these soft skills, and that's why companies now tend to do their own training on these soft skills. So by and large, the private sector do train and have a bigger role, and this they've been spurred on by the Human Resource Development Fund. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Matthews. Great. My next question would go to Ahmed. As an academic specialist in technology, I would like to ask you, Ahmed, to give us an idea about the quality in general and more specifically the relevance of training, because non-state actors engagement is often associated with more relevance of training. And you also touched this somehow in your presentation already. And what would you say? Is this always the case? And how do you engage the private business sector more precisely? You said you did this, or you do that, to be honest, and you've stressed on industry engagement, but how do you really engage the private businesses?
Well, let me answer the question. The short answer would be yes, it must be there, and it must be there all the time. That sort of engagement with the private sector to the point that you consider them your customer, and you take them towards a partnership journey where there is a clear win-win model. You know what you're getting out of this, and you know what you're getting out of this as a TVET institution. There's a number of factors that has to be considered when we work with the government. And I'm going to take, and I mentioned in my presentation that there are three main pillars. One has to do with the material itself, the training, the curriculum, and the other one has to do with research, and the third one has to do with entrepreneurship. Let me take that curriculum piece, because I think if what's really happening on the ground is you might want to go and talk to HR directors in private companies. Ask them, what jobs do you need now in the future? You get some answers, and then, okay, what skills do you need? You get some answers, and then you go back to your institution and you try to decipher what does that really mean, and then you try to convert that into curriculum. It becomes more of a one-time off exercise. It does not provide any value. And you've mentioned relevance. Relevance is not a one-time off exercise. It has to be systematic. You have to build that ecosystem where that engagement is always happening. So what do we do at HCT is, first, we try to understand the landscape when it comes to what are the skills that are needed now, what are the skills that are needed in the future. And when we do that through conversations. Of course, we look into reports that are published by think tanks from around the world, but we also do that in collaboration with sector councils, with chambers of commerce, with major players in the industry. We don't just talk to the HR directors, but we also talk to the people that are on the field, on the job, that have and know what the technical requirements are. And we ensure that this is some sort of a continuous dialogue. And from there, we try to build profiles of jobs, entry jobs, that are skill-based, competency-based, and then we go back and we review our programs in light of those profiles. But when we conduct that review, we don't conduct it solo either. We have what we call industry advisory committees, and these are formed from the industry in collaboration with our own faculty and trainers. And this is where they look at the curriculum and make sure that it does actually reflect what the industry wants and what the industry said it wants. And they don't meet one time off. It's again, there is a number of meetings that are taking place. There are validations that are taking place to the programs, and we've got to get the endorsement one way or another before we move to the next step, which is the delivery of the program. In the delivery as well, you cannot deliver in isolation from the industry. So we talked about internships. We talked about, it can go all the way to apprenticeships, work placements, or even experiential learning. They can go out for a year, the students work somewhere, and then come back, and they will learn from that. And finally, when we do the review for those programs and curriculum, again, it has to be done with the collaboration from the industry. So it's the entire cycle from development, and that's what I meant by co-creation, all the way to the delivery and review. You've got to maintain that constant link and touch point with the industry and other non-state actors that have a say on the skills and the competencies needed for a specific sector.
Thanks, Ahmed. So it's an ongoing cycle that probably also never ends, because we never know what kind of technology will be relevant in a few years when your students graduate, for example?
If you want to stay relevant, it has to be ongoing and it has to be systematic, and it has to be clearly defining what's in it for all parties involved.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks. So my last question goes to Jing. I know Huawei is closely collaborating also with the UNEVOC Center Polytechnic in Shenzhen. As you already mentioned, Huawei is based in Shenzhen. And as representative for technology corporations, I'm interested to hear from you. What characterizes the training and education provided by companies as non-state actors, and what do they do to ensure innovative provision?
Really, Huawei is collaborating with your UNEVOC Center Polytechnic Shenzhen quite a long time, and Huawei as a non-state actor, I think the characters of the training and education from Huawei side, we think is the first point is driven by industry development requirement, because Huawei is always working with the enterprises, government, and we know the trend of development of ICT technology and the demand from the end users, and the demand of the digital skills from the end users. And so Huawei need to transfer the end users, translate the end users' language to the university college understanding language. So Huawei here worked as a bridge. Secondly, we think our training and education with the Shenzhen Polytechnic is the character is demand driven by the different learning groups, because in the university there are different faculty and different the focus. So Huawei is providing our quality standard, is our certification standard to the Shenzhen Polytechnic. And they, based on our standard, to they can modify and customize their own curriculum and the standard for the different learning groups. The third one is, we think, is the character is driven by the new technology evolution and the innovation, because Huawei is keeping invest in the science and technology R&D. So within the emergency of the new technologies, so we see there appears the new industry in China, especially in the mobile service operating system, besides the iOS and Android. Now in China, already 220 million devices equipped by Huawei mobile operating service. So here is there are huge potential for the students who will face in their future career. So it's our responsibility to ask the Shenzhen Polytechnic to involve more in the new technology evolution and innovation. And the first one we think is the most important is the openness, collaboration, and inclusiveness. Because Huawei is only one private sector, one private company, we can't do everything. So we need the partners. For example, in the education sector, we need the Huawei ICT academies who know the teaching the theory and who knows the teaching method. And Huawei can only provide what we have and provide the resources to the teachers. And the teacher, they need to thinking more to motivate and to design the curriculum for their students. And also Huawei needs the partners. And so for the lifelong learners, so we collaborate with more than 120 Huawei authorized learning partner to provide our exams and trainings for the lifelong learners. And also Huawei will keep open and invest more in collaborating between school and enterprises to explore various models to better promote the construction of digital ICT world. And here I would like to share one PPT sent from the Shenzhen Polytechnic, Professor Yang. It's a pity that he is busy now. He is absent. He asked me on behalf of Shenzhen Polytechnic to share a case what we have done in Shenzhen together with the Shenzhen.
Thank you, Jing. Maybe you could just do this quite quickly and just give us a broad overview, but because as you have noticed, we are running a little bit late. I don't want to interrupt you, but just to
thank you. I will quick pass it. So as I described, the Shenzhen Polytechnic is the ranked #1 in China, and she is also the UNEVOC Hub, Skills for Innovation Hub. And what we have done with Shenzhen Polytechnic, we integrated our qualification and their curriculum. So Huawei, responding to ICT development, keep upgrading our certification standard, and they get our qualification standard and input the invest the resources and cultivate the teachers, develop the courses, and they integrate the qualification to their curriculum and keeping this kind of the evaluation. And then they, based on our qualification, they redesigned their curriculum as the Lego model for the students. They can learning and choosing the materials what is reflect what is the more individual learning with the learners. And also based on our qualification, Shenzhen Polytechnic defined the quality standard for the learners. There is 7 different there is 7 dimensional ability, and they based on Huawei 3 levels, ACI, IP, and IE, to design the standard. And also for the teaching method, they designed the 5-step teaching method. Its key focus is based on the project to cultivate the ICT talent. And also Huawei and Shenzhen Polytechnic actively attend the China government 1+X program. And under this program, we launched the teaching materials. And we together equipped the lab and built the environment. And and also we are emerging. We are keeping to make cultivate the high level faculty, and we are sharing Huawei's authorized service service partners standard to the Shenzhen Polytechnic. They use our standard and design their training to ask the students on the practice and estimate their capability and the skills. So here is the result. Okay.
Sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. You just made clear really how industry and education go together and work hand in hand and really apply what is really needed. We make all these presentations available on the webinar website. And of course, we can also add this final presentation we didn't manage to go completely through to. So we are very happy to hand this on to everyone who is interested in it. With a look on my watch, we can unfortunately see that we are running already late. I'm sorry for that. But I think it was really very interesting to get all your insights. I could also see that some of the questions from the audience are already answered in the chat. So thank you very much for this. If there are still open questions, please, if someone still could answer, this would be of great benefit. Thanks especially to our 4 speakers for your time, for your valuable input from all the different perspectives you're bringing here. It was really a pleasure discussing with you and hearing your input. So thanks a lot again. And today's discussion just touched upon the theme of technology, with this cycle that we always need to keep up to date our learners, students, but also the employees, the current employees. And this theme will be the focus of the 2023 GEM report. And we are looking forward to engaging you in separate consultations within our UNEVOC network and to feed these views into the development of the next GEM report. And it's time to say goodbye to all of you. We share with you another video of the Global Education Monitoring Report to motivate you to read or at least look into it. Thanks again to all our speakers and have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We have close to around 12 million people entering the workforce every year. The skill development problem cannot be solved by the government alone or neither by the industry alone.
Many of them are school leavers, college leavers. They need jobs and they're ideally suitable for entry-level jobs. To train them and put them in jobs, all the partner stakeholders need to work together.
मैंने सोचा कि बहुत अच्छा मौका मिला है मुझे क्योंकि ये बिल्कुल फ्री है। ये मेरा फर्स्ट स्टेप है क्योंकि मेरा बचपन से ही सपना रहा है कि मैं डॉक्टर बनूं।
The choice of schools available to low-income families is not nearly as good as the choices available to those wealthier families.
The reality is that the choice of a world-class neighborhood school within safe walking distance of my home was snatched from me.
As education privatization increased, African American students were increasingly segregated into low-income and uniracial schools, due both to an increase in charter schools and to public school closures.
그때부터 그런 혜택을 받았다고 할 수 있어요. 환경의 영향인 것 같아요. 본인이 욕심이 있고 또 어떻게 성취하고 싶은 목적이 있다면은 더 원하게 되는 경향이 생기는 것 같습니다. 이게 공교육이 꼭 부족해서라기보다는 여기서 좀 더 잘하고 싶다는 경쟁 의식.
A minha maior preocupação quando eu decidi me formar em recursos humanos utilizando o FIES já foi como eu pagaria. É muito assustador você ter a ideia de que você está fazendo um curso para pagar ele depois de 2 anos ali no contrato, sendo que você não tem certeza de que você vai arrumar um emprego dali 2 anos.
Ndi mukyala muzadde nina abaana 6 nezijjayo ssente netwala abaana ku masomero ne babeera nga basoma nga nze bwe noonya emirimu gye nkolakola okusobola okusasula ssente z'okuzizzaayo.
Government of Uganda is not financing universal primary education or universal secondary education as it is supposed to. Education is a public good which government should try as much as possible to ensure that each and every person or child gets the opportunity to access.
We should be reimagining public education, having conversations in neighborhoods all over the country.
Daqui a alguns anos, eu espero realmente que no Brasil as pessoas que não tenham dinheiro para cursar em uma universidade privada ou para pagar o curso, ou realmente precisar investir muito em educação no Brasil, elas tenham mais acesso.